Hey, Ryan Webb here. Hope you guys are doing great. So here I am in conversation with this awesome heavy rock artist, Jack J Hutchinson. He's a guitarist, singer-songwriter, and he's got a new album that's going to be out on the 4th of February next year. There's a latest single that's going to be out before Halloween, I believe. So more about that during the chat. So if you are into such videos, please subscribe to the channel. It would be really appreciated. So we're going to be chatting about guitars and all the gear and all that cool stuff that the man himself uses. So before we dive right in, first of all, man, thanks a lot for taking the time and having this chat with me. I really do appreciate it. So before we get into all that cool stuff about guitars and amps and pedal boards and all that cool stuff. I keep saying cool stuff quite a lot. Anyhow, tell me a bit about who is Jack J Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'm originally from the northwest of England, from a town called Burnley, but I've been in London and the sort of outskirts of London for the last sort of 12, 13 years. I've been a musician for about 20 years now in different, guises. I used to do a lot of sort of session work and that kind of thing, where I had a more sensible haircut and no beard. But yeah, I've been doing this a long time, and I've sort of in the last 4 or 5 years found my sort of solo career. Really, having played other people's music for a long time, I wanted to get to a point where I could play my own music and
Yeah.
write songs that mean something to me. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the last few years.
Cool. So when did you actually start writing? Your first ever, was it a single or did you come out with an album first of all?
Yeah, I suppose I was playing with a really great singer-songwriter about 6 or 7 years ago called David James Herbert, and we did an album together that was great. It got played on Six Music over here, songs from that record. But he was the songwriter, and that was the thing that kind of left a bit of a gaping hole for me in that project. I wanted to write my own material, and my influences have always been a lot heavier than, I guess, that sort
Yeah.
of acoustic singer songwriter stuff. So I started to put a band together. Actually, I went to Italy with my partner Liz, and I was in Italy for about 3 weeks, and I wrote an album whilst I was over there. And
Yeah.
then I was like looking for guys that could fit that sort of project. So yeah, I mean, I put together a band, and as with most musicians, you go through 6 or 7. It always seems to be bassists with me. I don't know what it is, bass players, until I found the right musicians to deliver that material.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a lot of fun putting it together, and yeah, just basically letting rip on guitar rather than being really sensible and sitting there on a stool playing acoustic.
See, the current setup that you have right now with the guys, how long have you had those same guys with you? Would you call them as session musicians that you kind of hire?
Well, that was the plan originally. I mean, it was, I think, as I'd had previously, I'd sort of had a group of guys that came in for different types of music, I suppose, and played on records and perhaps came out on tour with me. So Laz and Felipe, who are my band now, they just were hired to do a tour of Spain a couple of years back, and then we got on really well. And then at the end of it, I just said, should we do this as a more serious thing rather than me just hiring you for tours? Let's do this as a full-time thing. And thankfully they said yes. Thankfully I wound them up enough on that tour that they wanted to quit after just 2 weeks. So they're really good guys. And Laz is a big Sabbath fan, and Felipe is a big Led Zeppelin fan. So,
Yeah.
you can't really go wrong with two guys who those are their key influences.
Cool stuff, man. So what would be your earlier influences, as building up to a solo career?
I'd say, the big band that I really got into when I was a teenager was Led Zeppelin. And
Cool.
so, I've never grown tired of listening to those albums. And I spent a lot of hours when I was a teenager rushing home from school, getting on my guitar and trying to play like Jimmy Page. I
Yeah.
even got a violin bow. I've still got the violin bow that I had when I was about 15. It's in my spare room.
Awesome.
I only bring that out for Halloween, but I think it's kind of like, Jimmy Page touched on so many different genres. So as a it's kind of an encyclopedia of the history of music, actually, just to kind of learn through him all those old blues guys, the kind of rockabilly elements that are in there as well. I mean, Led Zeppelin even did, they even did reggae. So I kind of learned a bit of reggae through playing along with Zepp.
Awesome.
So they were the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, talking about Halloween, I know there's a new single that's going to be coming out just before Halloween. Is it okay for you to talk a little bit about that, or what is a genre change, or is it going back to the classic rock roots, or is it more heavier?
It's a bit of a mad song, to be honest. It kind of comes in with this riff that is quite high tempo and a bit, I guess, sort of Black Label Society, Black Sabbath-esque. But then there's a middle section that's quite slow and melodic that kind of takes you into a kind of like Neil Young sort of vibe. That's how I see it anyway. So yeah, I'm really pleased with it. We've packed a lot into 4 minutes, It's a single, so you got to kind of keep it short for radio. So yeah, and we've played it a couple of gigs over the last month and it's gone down really well. So
cool.
It's a good tune.
Awesome. So would you say you're like, well, knowing Jack J Hutchinson, you would say you're like the main writer for that, everything that you hear on the album or the single? Does the session musicians contribute to the parts that they are playing, like the drummer or the bass player?
Yeah, I mean, we've co-written a couple of tracks on the record, which I'll be honest, I found that a bit weird initially because I've always written on my solo albums all the material, and I've always been a bit suspicious of people that bring in outside writers. I've never really quite understood that. Like, if it's your album, like, write about the stuff that affects you. Until I started getting great emails from the guys with suggestions for tracks, and so we've co-written a track on there called "World on Fire," which came out as a single a little while ago. And just working with other people brings a certain level of critique to the table that I guess I've been used to people basically telling me everything's just awesome. And then having somebody co-write with you, you present them with riffs and they go, actually, that's not very good. You need to do better. And my bass player Laz is very opinionated, and initially I was like, who the hell do you think you are? I'm the it was the almost famous I'm the lead singer sort of moment. But yeah, it's been a good exercise to work with the guys to co-write.
That's awesome, man. So is that right? There's an album coming out on the 4th of February next year. Is that confirmed?
Yeah, I mean, it was originally supposed to come out in October, but we've pushed it back slightly. Mainly to do with the vinyl manufacturing. It's going to take a little bit longer to get the vinyl together. And I didn't want to release multiple versions at different times, So 4th of February is when it's due out, and we've got a big show that we're doing in London around that time that is sort of the album launch gig. So yeah, it's going to be worth the wait for everyone that's sort of pre-ordered. It's only a couple months. It means you can enjoy your Christmas and then come into 2022 expecting a brand new kick-ass album.
Yeah, exactly, man. Jack J Hutchinson's gonna hit you in your face.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So the album, was it kind of recorded in like one of those traditional studios that the band go in to record as a whole, or has anything been done in your home studio setup?
Yeah, we recorded the whole album at a studio called Momentum, which is down in Devon in the UK. And we worked with this guy called Josiah Manning, who's produced records for Inglorious and Chris Barris Band, and he's in Chris Barris Band. And we toured with them about 2 years ago. And I think I spoke to Josiah around that time, and said it'd be really good to work together on a record. So bringing somebody else in different to the previous albums, I think it's given it that extra sort of oomph that it needed. The chap who produced my two previous albums is a geezer called Tony Peretta, who's brilliant as well. But I wanted to just try something slightly different this time out, and it was good to work in in a big studio with lots of posh equipment and lots of vintage orange Marshall amps, and make some noise in that sort of space.
Awesome. So for all this work that's gone into the album, man, what is your main guitar, or which is your main guitar that you use on the records?
So the main guitar that we used on the record is this one, which is a Gibson Les Paul Standard that I've had I bought this in 1999, and it was a present from my dad.
Awesome.
It was kind of like my dad said, if you get a job as a gardener and save up £500, I will give you the rest, which is what happened. And I've used this on all my albums, and I used it. It was my main touring guitar for quite a few years, but the sentimental value of the guitar, and also the kind of the value of it generally, I don't take it on the road anymore. But this is what we use to track all the rhythm guitars,
all right, and
a lot of the lead as well. There were a couple of other guitars in the studio, the studio guitars, which is a Telecaster, which we used to do some sort of, just some overdubbing really right at the end of the sessions.
Yeah.
But I'm a big Les Paul fan, so I like the humbuckers and the general sound of this.
Yeah. Is that all stock, or do you do any kind of mods to your guitars?
Not on this one, no. This is as it was when I bought it. So this is a 1997 model.
Yeah.
Tell you what, not using it to play live is actually a bit of a benefit, because it weighs an absolute ton.
Yeah.
And it sounds brilliant, but you do sometimes, or I used to, walk off stage and you think, oh my God, I've got another 16 dates on this tour. So yeah, it's a beautiful guitar though.
Yeah. So what do you use in a live situation now, if you're not taking that one out? Precious one, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I've got this is kind of like my second Les Paul. This is actually a really cheap Les Paul. It's a Gibson as well, right, but it was I bought this about 4 or 5 years ago off eBay on the way back. I was on the train on the way back from a gig going through central London, and I was just on eBay like, and I just saw this guitar for about £300, and it was completely wrecked. It needed a lot of sort of fixing and stuff, but I'd never had a guitar with P90s previously, and I remember I took this on a tour. I think I went to the Czech Republic and did this sort of 3-week tour of the Czech Republic with this guitar, and it I was immediately in love with the sound of it. It's just so it's just very different, isn't it? The humbuckers give you a very different tone to P90s.
Yeah, of course,
and
man.
I was really pleased with how it sounds as a guitar to play lead on. It really cuts through, whereas the humbucker, the Les Paul, is I'd say more of my sort of rhythm sound now. But I absolutely love it, and it weighs less than the Gibson Les Paul Standard, which is always good. They've got this is one of those where they've got the kind of the hollowed out bits inside, but it's pretty good.
Does that happen to be like a studio version or something? It's not a Gibson Studio, is it? Or
it's called I think they're called tributes. These ones.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Cool. Those.
Yeah, they're quite cheap, and they've basically got no finish on them. So this has got like this satin kind of finish, and there's no binding on it as well, which is why they keep the costs down on it.
Yeah, still looks awesome.
But,
it freaking looks awesome.
Yeah, it's got a really lovely finish.
Yeah,
I spent quite a long time polishing it out and sort of bringing that colouring out. But I tell you what, I don't really give a crap about whether it's got a bit of binding on it. As long as it sounds good.
Yeah,
and trust me, like the amount of scratches all over that other Les Paul from gigs where there's a big scratch on the back of it. Well, I remember when I was about 19, I decided to do a bit of a Pete Townsend and smash my guitar into the drum kit, and there's a big crunch in the back from that. But they're memories from gigs that will never go.
How did it work out for the drummer though? Crashing that guitar. How did it work out for the drummer?
He was pissed off. He was very pissed off.
Awesome.
But it's rock and roll, isn't it? Yeah,
awesome, man. So apart from that, I can see a couple of other cool looking guitars in the background, man. I'm guessing that is something that goes into the live situation, or that one there looks freaking awesome. I can tell
So
just by a little bit. That is
this one
freaking
is
awesome, man.
this is my understated guitar to play Nick Drake folk on. No, I'm only joking. This is my Wild Audio. This is called a Warhammer guitar. So Wild Audio is the it's the sort of branded signature guitars of Zach Wild.
Yeah.
And he launched these about 6 years ago. And they're quite funny because they've polarized a lot of people. Some people absolutely despise the look of them, but I think they look really badass.
Yeah.
And these ones are very different sounding because obviously you've got the EMGs in these rather than humbuckers or P90s. But they're really good live.
Yeah, so the Wild Audios are part of Schecter. Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So they're not, I think there are certain Wild Audios that are American made, but these are South Korea. But, you know, I think the actual quality of the build is incredible on them.
Yeah.
And I just like the feel of them. They've got this big sort of C-shaped neck, which I think is really nice. Yeah. I've got quite big hands, so it kind of fits my hands.
Cool.
The Les Paul Tribute feels kind of big as well, but my Les Paul Standard, in comparison, when I switch guitars now, it's like I'm trying to play the banjo.
I can see that you've got EMG pickups on there, man. So that
I'd never had a guitar with EMGs in previously, and I'll admit that when I was a teenager, I had friends who were really into that sort of stuff, and I was, as I said, I was a big Jimmy Page, Slash. They were my big two when I was a teenager, and I was like, I'm not going to get something like that. But you know, they're really easy to play, and when you're going out and doing a run of shows, a guitar that kind of fits and feels comfortable to play and isn't going to bust your back. I mean, they're quite big guitars, but they're not as heavy as Les Pauls. And I'll tell you what, if you wear a guitar like this, you can always guarantee that someone will take a picture of you.
Of course,
you do tend to get the press coverage just on the colour of the guitar.
Awesome. So do you actually ever track with those guitars? Ever?
Yeah, I used it on a couple of tracks on the new album, The Hammer Falls.
Yeah.
I used this one as well. I've got two Wild Audio guitars. This is one which is called a Viking V.
Yeah.
And I used this on a track on the album which is called Angel of Death, and I used this to do all the lead parts on that.
Yeah.
And these sound identical, really. There's no difference in the tone, which I guess is what you get from a high-powered EMG guitar.
Yeah, of course, man.
You try to play slow with these things, and then you end up just completely going for it. But yeah, I absolutely love them. I think they're great.
Yeah. Cool. It looks freaking awesome, man. So what amps, why would I say what amps you're using? Of course, you're a Marshall, dude. You just love your Marshalls. It looks, so which model of Marshalls are those?
So the main amp that I've used on the new album is a JCM 2000, which is the 100-watt head.
All right.
Which I've had for, 15 years, something like that. It's one of the original ones, which I just think it sounds absolutely killer. And then I've got a newer version, which is kind of my touring head, which is it's part of the same line, the DSLs, but this is the new 100-watt head here, which I take out with me. Just because it feels, for some reason, it feels a little bit more reliable than the one that I've just kicked the hell out of for 15 years.
So is that the amp that we actually would hear, or from the past releases? Is that the amp that we always hear on your records?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite picky about making sure that amp is on.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is. There's some sort of weird OCD thing about that amp having to feature on all my albums. I don't know. But we used an orange head on there as well to do. We basically did a just sort of left and right thing in terms of the rhythm. So we doubled up all of the guitar parts with an orange head. So we had a telly into the orange. It kind of just gives it a bit of a thicker tone on the record.
Awesome, man. So would you say for the rhythm section, you'll have two takes on, one on the left and two on the right? So it's like you have a quad rhythm section going on.
Kind of. I mean, some of the tracks we've got we've got about 8 sections where you've
All
got
right.
this kind of crazy wall of guitar tone.
Yeah.
But this is the first record where I've done that. I think my previous albums, it's strange because the guitar almost was like an afterthought with my previous records.
Yeah.
And they were very much, you know, as I mentioned, I'm a big Neil Young fan. So my previous albums were more of a sort of amalgamation of kind of blues rock and kind of country Americana stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas this new record is really about my, you know, my love of hard rock. And I think that that's been good because I've basically spent 9 months in the studio doing lots of work on the guitar.
Yeah.
Is the fun bit. I don't like all the bass recording and recording the drums. I can't be bothered with all that. So getting through to the guitar part was a lot of fun.
Cool. So how come you decided to, or was it like it just happened that the new album is a little bit heavier than the normal Jack J Hutchinson sound?
I think I've been writing songs on the last record, Who Feeds the Wolf, that were kind of veering towards that anyway. But then I think what happened with the last record, I wrote Who Feeds the Wolf during a very difficult period where my dad had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, and we had a lot of family issues. So there's quite a lot of sadness on my last record. Right. And this one feels more like a kind of celebratory, not a party record, because there's some quite heavy themes on there, but it's definitely got more energy than the last one. The last one was more kind of introspective, I guess. And there is elements of that in the new album, but I just wanted to write some songs where, you know, you could go out and tour it as a collection of tracks. Yeah. I felt like when I think I probably said the same thing on the last album. Then when we got out on the road, we played 4 songs from the album. Whereas with this one, there's a track right at the end of the new album, which is called What Doesn't Kill You Only Makes You Stronger, which we've worked with Kevin Shirley from Iron Maiden, produced Iron Maiden, Led Zeppelin, loads of incredible bands. And he's done the mix of that song, and it, you know, that is going to be badass live. You know? Yeah. This isn't, you know, like there's plenty of albums that you get where they only play 2 or 3 tracks. You know, they have the singles and then the rest of it is just filler. You can't have that. I didn't want that. I wanted this to be 10 songs that, from start to finish was kick ass.
Cool, man. I can't wait to hear the album. So, how does the writing process actually start? Does it start with you just finding a riff, or where does the moment start from you think, okay, this is how this track is going to go onto the album, and you confirm it? So where does it all begin?
It's kind of weird how things come out. I mean, I've written songs, a big song for my last album, which was called Justified. I wrote that at 2 a.m. in a hotel in Russia. Like, cool. I just played a gig and it just kind of it came out, you know, that night. But obviously last year we couldn't tour. So a lot of the material in the new album I wrote when we went into lockdown. And it was a really great sort of 6-week spell when I was trapped in my flat and I had nothing else to do. And I started to basically set up a home studio. Yeah. And so I ordered a load of equipment off Amazon. Yeah. Set it up in our spare room. And then me, the drummer and bass player, Laz and Felipe, we were just banging songs to one another via Dropbox. Awesome. And we had Felipe actually went back to Brazil for a while. He was originally from Brazil. And he lost all of his work here. So he was like, well, I'm going home. But we continued to work on the record whilst he was in Brazil, because technology now. Yeah, the only problem was because of the time difference. He was sending me things at 4 a.m. and I was completely asleep by that point. But it was a really, really, I felt like a really creative time and almost like backs against the wall. We're having to deal with this awful situation. Yeah. What can we do? And it was a welcome distraction from just watching, you know, Cobra Kai on Netflix and that kind of stuff. You know?
So when you're writing, writing lyrics and stuff like that, what inspires you? Do you have like a place you go to where you need to chill out, or that's when you get inspired to write lyrics and stuff?
I'll tell you what, man. I think like you can be inspired anywhere, and I think I spent a lot of time in the past worrying about lyrics and worrying about them being having to have this kind of really in-depth and universal meaning. And actually, once I started to relax about that and just write about things that kind of impact me on a day-to-day basis, it became easier to write. And I think the lyrics are better for it, because I'm not trying to, write this grandiose story in every single song that's got this magical narrative that reveals the meaning of the universe or whatever. It's just a song, isn't it? So I've written songs. I remember I wrote a really great song, Walking Around a Supermarket. And it's a track that we still get asked to play. I still get asked to play hip slicking at gigs. And I wrote that walking around Sainsbury's in Camden. And I hate going shopping. I was there with my girlfriend and I just was infuriated by the whole situation. And I used to have a little dictaphone, but now I just use my iPhone.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I look like I'm a bit mad walking along and people see me just humming stuff. But you got to get it down when it appears, because I think that I've done weeks where I'm like, right, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to write.
Yeah.
And nothing happens.
Yeah, of course.
And then you go back out on the road and then it's like, oh, we're in a sound check and this riff's just appeared.
Yeah.
Somebody get my iPhone,
do 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 do. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, you heard my new single.
Yeah. I do that all the freaking time, man. Grab the iPad. I think my iPad is just filled with all this kind of weird stuff. So would you this new album that's going to be out on the 4th of Feb, is there like a story from start to finish, from the first track? Is there 10 tracks, if I'm getting it right? Would there be 10 tracks? So is there like a story from track 1 to, say, track 10?
Well, as I say, when I was writing this stuff in lockdown initially last year, I came up with this idea that it'd be great to do a concept album. And I was reading the Dark Tower books by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And so I got about 2 songs in where they were kind of themed around those books. And then I just got bored and I was like, I'm reading something else now.
Yeah.
So there's no overarching theme, but there's 2 songs, which is Gunslinger and Angel of Death, which have kind of hints towards Stephen King.
Yeah.
And then we had an instrumental, which is called The Wastelands, which is another one of those books, but that does not have any references to Stephen King at all, but apart from the title. But
So going back to tracking, guitars and stuff like that, what kind of a pedalboard setup do you have? Do you actually track with the pedalboard that you would use in a live situation, man?
Yeah, man. I'll lift my board up actually.
That's cool.
And see if you can see it. This is where it'll start falling off.
That's almost huge. That's cool. Very neat,
I've seen
man.
bigger boards.
That's freaking neat, man.
So, to be honest, when we were tracking the guitars, most of the time they were going straight into the amp, rather than using anything from this board. And it's kind of pathetic. I've got on this board, I've got like a micro Pog Electro Harmonics, Mad Professor Deep Blue Delay. I've got a couple of I've got a Zach Wild chorus on there, an MXR phase. But the main pedal that we used was this Boss equalizer pedal,
cool.
Which is at the bottom down here.
Yeah.
And we just used it as a boost. And it sounded great. So we didn't really use any effects at all. I mean, I'm not that sort of guitar player where I chuck on a load of effects and it all ends up sounding like the Edge from U2. I'm more of a plug straight in. I mean, Angus Young is one of my heroes. I'm more into that kind of
course,
tone.
Man. So is there like a custom pedal that's, a Jack J Hutchinson custom pedal on that board there?
It's not a custom pedal, but the Deep Blue Delay Mad Professor pedal, I'm endorsed by them.
Awesome.
And so that's kind of the pedal that I'm endorsed to use.
Yeah.
And I love it. I got into that pedal actually.
Yeah.
So I've got my Marshall like pinging me in the ear, but you probably can't pick that up on the mic here. But the Deep Blue Delay was being used by Mark Ford from the Black Crowes, and I saw him using it.
Cool.
And this is probably about 10 years ago now. And I was like, God, that sounds great, particularly on like the jam sort of songs.
Yeah.
So I got in touch with them and said, can I get hold of one?
Yeah.
And then we just got chatting about endorsements and stuff. And so they offered me an endorsement, and they sent me 2. So if I manage to somehow break this one, I've got a spare.
Awesome,
but
man.
it's lasted a long time on the road and never broken. So
cool.
It's hanging in there.
So what gauge of strings and what brand of strings are you using, for tracking? Does that same thing happen, with the gauge while you're tracking and in a live situation as well? Do you use the same gauge, same brand?
Yeah, I mean, I've used skinny top, heavy bottom Ernie Bulls for years.
Yeah.
And I've got all of my guitars, they're all set up in exactly the same way. Cool. There's a chap who he actually is based just around the corner from where I live in St Albans here, who does the setups on my guitars.
Yeah.
And it's great because he kind of sets them all up to feel very similar. So you're not getting certain, surprises when you switch guitars in a gig setting.
Yeah.
And I like having a heavy low end, because I really do hammer these guitars when I'm playing live.
Yeah.
I have to be kind of calmed down in the studio, because it's like you don't need to be nailing these guitars like you're on stage at Wembley, just play the song.
Yeah.
And I used to have maybe I'm wimping out as I get a bit older, but I used to use 11s, but obviously the skinny tops are slightly thinner than that. So it just makes those ear-piercing bends a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'll switch from those strings now. They're kind of quite an integral part of my sound, I'd say.
Yeah, of course, man. Sounds awesome. Yeah. So do you have like a basic home studio setup where you track or maybe do any overdubs with guitars that would actually end up on the album at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've just got a Mac in the other room, and then as I say, when we went into lockdown last year, we were very fortunate in that we'd got out on tour in February last year, so we did a month before COVID hit. So I'd managed to rein in a bit of money over that month period, and I just blew it all on gear. So the Wild Audio guitar, that's an example of something I bought. But yeah, I just bought various different microphones and things that I've never had any experience of studio recording in terms of doing it myself. I've always gone to other people.
Yeah.
So it was great to sit there on, watching YouTube videos, trying to learn about this stuff. And as I say, it was great to be able to send this stuff. And we released a record last year that was completely recorded at home. So we did, as I say, the drums were all recorded in Brazil.
Yeah.
The bass player, he lives in Banbury, in the middle of England. And it was all being mixed by a producer in Brazil. So we were just sending all this stuff via Dropbox, and then Lucas pulling it all together in his amazing studio in Brazil.
Yeah, that's awesome,
mad, man.
Yeah, it sounds cool, Yeah, sounds really cool, man. I guess you got to do what you got to do, right, in order to keep things moving. So can we expect a big tour or like a mini tour next year for when the album is released?
Yeah, so we're doing a short UK tour in February. We're doing a big UK tour in October and November this year. Then the kind of the dates that we couldn't slot in this year then. And then we're going to Spain to do a 2-week stint in Spain. Then we're going to Switzerland, which would be quite cool. And then I'm supposed to be going to America in June, which would be pretty cool as well. And then hopefully back to Brazil in September.
Yeah. Awesome.
So it's shaping up to be quite a good year. And then when it gets to like November, I'm just going to have a holiday.
That sounds awesome, man. So before we end this chat, first of all, thanks a lot for taking the time and having this chat with me. Do you want to give a shout out to your fans or brands or, anyone or anything at all out there?
I'll tell you what I'd like to give a shout out to. Who I'd like to give a shout out to is a geezer of mine, of my fans, who's been great over the last 3 or 4 years supporting me, and he's just given me this
friggin' awesome
original It's
Yeah.
one of the original prints of Led Zeppelin 4. So thanks to Pete Hearn, who's given me that amazing vinyl. So yeah, I you know, the way that I've done this album as well over a very tough 12 months for everybody. I think it's been great having those fans kind of back me and pull me through this. So I just hope they dig the record when they, you know, when it comes out. I'm sure they will, but there's a lot of investment from us in this record, but a lot of investment from the fans as well in keeping us going through the pandemic. So thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thanks, man. And again, thanks for having this chat with me. I can't wait to see you out on the road soon. So take care, man.
Cheers, man. Keep on rocking.
Cool.